find all of that so interesting. All of our different choices that we make in life and all of our different experiences. All of us as women have a relationship with motherhood, even if we're not mothers, right?
Welcome to our latest episode of Book Reporter Talks To. It's our first one of 2024, where our guest today is Katherine Faulkner, and we are going to be talking about her latest thriller, a book I absolutely love, which is called The Other Mothers. Yes, folks, it's The Other Mothers. We're going to talk a little bit about what other mothers mean. It's a Book Reporter Bets On selection. It was one of my last of 2023, which is just like her first book, GREENWICH Park, which I loved, and I loved talking to her about it, I guess now a couple of years ago. So here we go again. Before we get started, I want to tell her that in our book reporter interview, Nora Peel had this to say about the book. The tension and suspense ratchet up slowly but surely, with nearly every chapter in the book's second half containing some new and unexpected revelation. I will say that is completely true. And with that intro, Katherine, welcome. So good to see you again.
Oh, so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So let's start by you giving us your overview of The Other Mothers.
Sure. So The Other Mothers tells the story of Tash, who is a new mother, investigative journalist trying to relaunch her career after the birth of her son. So she's looking for her next big scoop. And she's also looking for something else. She's looking for friends to help her navigate motherhood. She's feeling kind of lonely, finding it challenging, trying to juggle everything. Loves her son, but has been kind of felt that her career's been pushed to the side a bit. She's very keen to get back into it. And she finds these other women at her son's playgroup, which is in a much more affluent area than where she and her husband are able to live. And they are mothers who seem to have such a seductive life, another version of motherhood, which where the playdates take place in beautiful houses and the wine flows freely and nobody's worrying about the cost of childcare, and there's nannies on demand and macrobiotic recipe boxes and flower subscriptions and all the rest of it. And Tash finds these women very seductive and is sort of surprised and delighted when they invite her into their exclusive little clique. But then she starts investigating the death of a local nanny called Sophie Blake, who died in a beauty spot, was found drowned. And she's convinced that this could be the scoop she's been waiting for. But the more she investigates Sophie's death, the closer her investigation brings her to the other mothers who have befriended her and invited her into their exclusive little world. And she starts to wonder whether maybe there's a reason that she's been invited into this group, and in fact starts to wonder who's really investigating who.
Who really is trying to find out, what do you know? How much do you know about what's been going on? It's just so much. I tell you, I've heard this book called The Dark Side of Motherland. And I think that's like so perfect about it, because it's you getting to know these women, but what is really going on? What's really the story? And you're trying to really, she has this little boy, Finn, who really doesn't fit in. And he's having trouble getting used to being at school. And now she's sitting there, she's finding some place where one mother kind of beckons him and says, hey, come play with my child. And it's his gateway in. So she feels like she has to be friends with these women because it's her gateway for her son as well as herself.
For sure. And that's why these relationships are so fraught, right? Because they're all tied up in our hopes and dreams from worries and fears for our children. And we're massively projecting onto them all these social anxieties. And we feel like if we don't succeed socially, then neither will they. So it's all way more fraught than usual kind of human interaction.
And we have to have them in with these children, because if they do, this is going to happen. I remember when my children were in about second grade, one of the mothers, we were at a baseball game. She turned around, she goes, when do you think VG plus stops? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, when do they all stop getting that on the paper? Because right now everybody's getting very good plus. She goes, and they're all not going to Harvard. So like, at what point does it stop? And I just sat there and went, there's kind of like something there, because you're trying to get them to all be the same for a very long time. And then somebody's going to start excelling, but at what point? And I think what she's trying to do right now is just have her son fit in. And then someday she's going to want him to not want to be a part of a crowd. But right now it's all about you fit in, I fit in, I'll drink the big latte because they are, so you fit in. Am I right?
Yeah, exactly right. She's absolutely desperate for him to fit in. But she's also, there's something else going on with her as well. She's very aspirational and she lives in a city where there are huge wealth disparities. And she and her husband are well qualified, educated people. They work really hard, but they don't earn the big bucks. And they live in a kind of modest basement flat, and she looks at these other women and she just can't understand why she can't have the life that they have, and she's completely intrigued by the way they live and the way that they make motherhood look so easy, right? Because all this money greases the wheels of everything, makes everything easier. So there's a lot going on. She wants her son to fit in at the playgroup. She wants him to be happy and settled, and that's a big part of it. But it's really hard to disentangle that from this kind of interest she has in having a better life for herself as well as her family, and her complete fascination with the women who seem to have what she wants as well.
Yeah. And it's like, what does it take? Does it take, oh, going to the spa together? Is that going to make us friends?
Yeah.
Is going out for lunch together? Is shopping together? Just being with each other? Where does it? And her husband's not grasping this at all. At the same time, he's like, why? He's a doctor. So he has not left his career. She's the one who's left hers. And he's just there like, well, why does this matter? Why do these women matter? And he's not understanding where she's coming from at all.
Which I think is so common because their experience of parenthood is so different. It's
Mhm.
it's in I mean, I'm generalizing, but usually it's the woman who feels that they have to give up their career. And sometimes I think we women don't help ourselves because usually it's the women who want to, right? They're like, no, I
Mhm.
want to be there. I need to be there. I'm a bad mother if I'm not there at the playgroup gates or the school gate at so many hours a week, and I need to do so. Our careers take, and we tend to earn less, right? Because of the gender pay gap. So
Yes.
it almost always becomes, no, let's compromise my career. But it leads to such a confused identity, I think, sometimes, and it can really affect our confidence, not having a career in the same way that we used to before children, and our sense of who we are, which takes a battering when you become a mother anyway, right? Because there are so many things that used to be part of the person you thought you were, all the things that you used to do with your spare time that you can't do anymore. So then you're like, well, who's this person who's left over, this person who's just constantly cooking pesto pasta? Like, where did I go? And then if you're not working as much, that's also part of it. It's part of that personal loss you feel. And sometimes I think men just don't get any of this stuff because their lives basically carry on as before. I was reading some research that actually men's careers go from strength to strength when they have children. They tend to actually get promoted.
Mhm.
It tends to actually look good for them if they have like a family and they're seen as this. Whereas for women, it's obviously like the worst thing that can happen to your earnings. It just completely plateaus or drops off after you have children, even if you've had really steep progression in your 20s or before that. So it's all, yeah, it's all all that stuff is in the mix for her and her husband Tom for sure.
I remember when I got pregnant, I think it was with my first son, five of us were pregnant at the same time because everybody was the same age group. And they're like, what are we going to do those months? Like all these people are going to be out. Who's first? Who's second? And I said, when I said I was pregnant, I didn't mean for everybody to get pregnant. It was like, this is not the follow the leader thing. But it's hard because women are going to be out for a period of time, then they're going to come back. And I also find it really interesting right now because people are pushing for longer maternity leaves. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But what you really want is time to go to softball. And you really want time to take them to the doctor when they're 3, or to
Mhm.
go to that, costume exhibit, what they're going to be doing for Halloween when they're 4. And
Mm.
I think that everybody's so hung up on those first days. And then it's like, yeah, but there's a lot of time that's needed later on. And then there's the balance of, I have a lot of friends who've never had children. And they're like, well, we've picked up the slack every single time in the office. And maybe they've gotten ahead, but there are other people who've done well who have kids. So it's like, well, where's the line? Where's the marching point?
I think, and all of these things create these most fascinating kind of psychological, these contours of and difficulties between women and these tensions. And I find all of that so interesting. All of our different choices that we make in life and all of our different experiences. All of us as women have a relationship with motherhood, even if we're not mothers, right? Because we have to. We have a mother, and we also have this societal expectation that we're going to be a mother, even
Right.
if it's, nothing could interest us less. So we all have this a dynamic for us women of a certain age. We have to define ourselves within motherhood or against it in some form, you
Mhm.
know, and that's just something that society forces on us, and there's nothing much we can do about it. And I think sometimes in order to justify our choices in regards to that, we have to kind of slightly denigrate the choices of others, or there's a human impulse to do that, or
Mhm.
to get frustrated with the choices of others. You know, if you're the person who always works the unpopular time to work because other women are pulling the motherhood card, you know, of course that's just so annoying. And I find but I find all those tensions between women really interesting to write about, so it's all good for me.
Yeah, and and what's also changed a lot too is now you can work remotely. Now you can work at
Yeah.
home at night. Now you can work, like when I left, there was no like let's like I think email was beginning. Yeah, it was like the beginning of sending email to each other, but it wasn't deep into this is how you interact. Now it's like going to the office is like a big deal. Like, oh, we're
I
gonna go to the
know.
office on Tuesday. What a big deal. But
Yeah.
I also love that she's also seeing that this is a time for her to be a journalist and get into the story because she's trying to find a story she can wrap her chops around. So this nanny's missing, she's found dead. Like, okay, this is the story I'm going to write. This is the one I'm going to attach myself to. And I think that's like so interesting because there are stories that are happening all around you but this is a big story of what she thinks she can do. But these other women don't really want her to tell the story. They don't want to talk about this other person that wasn't the mother, that wasn't who was going on.
Well,
So,
nobody seems to want her to tell the story. You know, her husband is very skeptical about it and kind of seems to be discouraging her looking into it. Thinks it's, you know, she's making a big leap, saying that this unexplained death was actually a murder. The other mothers are very closed when she tries to talk to them about it. And then, of course, she starts getting threatening messages. So there's someone out there who really doesn't want her to talk. So but actually the kind of person that she is, you know, there's a saying about journalists that they're the people running towards the flames when everybody else is running away. You know, they want to be at the heart of a story, even if, you know, and somebody telling them back off is like red rag to a bull, you know. So for her, that's like, no, I'm going to expose you. I'm going to find out what happened here. This just tells me that there is a story that my instincts are right, and I'm going to come after it. So
I'm coming right for you. I'm coming right for you in the story. So when she's doing this, she's like, she's looking for the story. Does this mirror a little bit about who you were, that you were a journalist and you're still looking for a story? And now it's
yeah,
in books?
for sure. I mean, I was a journalist for over 10 years, and I worked as an investigative journalist and news reporter, both here and abroad. And I did in undercover work, you know, I did lots of different reporting in lots of different guises. And, you know, I love a good story, and that was my training and my whole career. And it's only the past year or so that I've been writing as an author full time, and I miss it, to be honest. It was a big part of my life. And it's interesting you say about going into the office being a big deal. You know, I used to love the office and I miss the office. You know, being a full-time author is so dreamy in so many ways. You know, I can do it from anywhere, and I can sit in a cafe with my coffee and my laptop and just think about imaginary characters, and all of that is so nice. But yeah, you know, journalism and the adrenaline of that, I love. And yeah, I would like to think I was pretty dogged in pursuit of my stories. And but I they gave the process of being a journalist gave me so much inspiration for my books. And obviously journalist characters are very useful in thrillers because they can dig around and they can find things out. But also part of my inspiration for the other mothers was I found it fascinating when I was working as a journalist, the gap sometimes between what you can report and the truth and the real story. And you can
Mm-hmm.
never quite get to it. It's always just a bit unattainable as a journalist. You get as close as you possibly can. This is something that Tash says to Tom at one point, her husband, because he's saying, well, you don't know the full story. You've got these bits, but you don't have all the facts. And she's saying, you never do. That's not how journalism works. You do as best you can. And the interesting thing, I hope, about the book is that you see her piece together what she can of what's left of this story. But then you also hear from Sophie,
Mm-hmm.
and who you know is going to die. But you hear in the months before her death, this is how every time Tash finds something out, you hear from Sophie, okay, so this is how it really happened.
Yeah.
And what I find fascinating is that that gap is really unbridgeable. You know, for a courtroom to find out what happened, it'll never be quite the same as the vivid lived reality of the people who were there. And then what happened to them before and what happened afterwards, all of that is never part of the public consciousness. And so yeah, I wanted to play around with that gap, I guess, in writing the book.
Yeah, and you completely did, because we start to know some things because of Sophie, but then we don't know other things. And then she thinks that certain people know things, but they don't, and then they do. And it's just like it's a real play among all the characters that are going on. It's much bigger than Greenwich Park even was. And I could see like an advancement, I can say. And if I was writing a report card, I would give great progress.
Thank
Great
you.
I figured that's a good way to do it. Great progress, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, she's doing so well with this. And, it's funny because a lot of parents send their children to school at certain places just so they can hang with those parents, because those are the parents that are going to have the good fundraisers, and those are the parents that are going to go to the great places and hear about it. And a lot of it is positioning the family as well as positioning the child, like how I'm going to position us. And what Tasha's really seeing is, we can't afford this life. And she's going into debt to hang out with these women. Like
Yeah.
she can't afford the latte. She can't afford the beauty treatment. She can't afford all this stuff. When somebody says they're going to put it on their card, she doesn't feel it's a gift. She feels like it is charity. And
Mhm.
it's not the way she wants to feel. So there's that whole look at the whole thing as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think she really struggles with that. And I think a lot of people who live in London or other kind of expensive cities in the world, it's the same. You know, there are so many people pretending to be able to afford the lifestyle that other people can, and they really can't,
No.
you know. And she doesn't even want them to come to her house for a play date because she doesn't want them to know that she lives in this tiny flat and they don't even have a car at the moment. And um, yeah, she feels kind of embarrassed, but there's nothing to be embarrassed about. I mean, she is a working professional. Her husband is a really hardworking professional as well. But that's the kind of crazy thing about these situations. You know, they're the kind of people who did all the quote unquote right things. They
Right.
went to school, but you know, they're just working in professions where they're not making a lot of money. Whereas, you know, the other women in this group, because their partners work in finance or they run a business or whatever, they just have all this money. And
Right.
so their whole experience of life is completely different. Um, and and Tash finds it really frustrating. You know, she wants to give that life to her sons, and in a way, I think maybe she thinks getting close to these women is the best way of doing it, because she
Mhm.
knows she can't really afford it, but she can kind of give him the illusion of it, or give them both the illusion of it. Um, and whereas her husband doesn't care about all that stuff,
No.
so he doesn't. So that creates a tension as well in their marriage, because he doesn't understand why on earth she needs to spend, you know, £5 on a latte or a croissant or whatever when he's there in his hospital scrubs, you know, just bringing his packed lunch into work.
Right. And one of the other mothers works with him, which makes it
Yeah.
even more complicated. And there's a complication that happens with that later on in the book. I can't give a lot away. It's like we almost have to have everybody go read the book and then come back and we'll talk about this. But I feel that there's that kind of what can happen with that kind of strife as well, because a woman is working with your husband, and where can a story twist over there as well? So there are a lot of different angles, but she sees also what they're missing from their lives. Like as time goes on, she begins to see that. She has one husband that she thinks is looking at porn at one point. She thinks that this is going on. And she's seeing these people because she investigates. She's looking into their lives differently than they are. And in some ways, she's getting ready to move back from these very successful world that she wants to be in.
Yeah. That's right. She's got this push and this pull going on. She's on
Mhm.
one level, she's very seduced by the way they live, all the beautiful houses, all the kind of the fact that they're so welcoming to her on the surface. And, you know, she wants that life, you know, this lifestyle for her son. But at the same time, she can't help but kind of scratch the surface of this perfect reality. And every time she does, she keeps finding more things that don't quite add up.
Right.
Yeah, and one of the husbands maybe looks like he might have been linked to a Me Too scandal at work, or you know, and then another one is very flirtatious, and what's that all about? And then yeah, and then there's this other woman who seems to want to be her best friend, but works with her husband, and her husband doesn't seem to want to be friends with her. So what's going on there? And So yeah, there's a lot under the surface, and I think there is always a certain pleasure in kind of clawing away the perfect surface of people whose lives seem to have it all, and finding out what's really underneath there. So I hope that that's fun for the reader.
It is. And then there's a parallel character, which is Sophie, which is Sophie's like, if she's like the mother who doesn't belong, Sophie's the nanny to the very wealthy family. And Sophie starts to see herself differently as well. We can't give anything away there, but Sophie starts to feel like she's living the life as well, like living la vida loca, even though she's
Yeah.
not there, you know. And what
She's
happens to
seduced
her?
in a different way, isn't she, by the
Yes, yes.
idea of the way that these mothers are living. But she also has a kind of unique insight into the reality behind this gilded lifestyle, because as a nanny, you see everything. You know, she
Mhm.
says at one point, you just can't keep secrets when you live in a house with someone. She's a live-in nanny. So she just knows all, you know, she sees the spit left in the sink in the morning, and you know, the bits of like hair that are shaved off, and she knows exactly like what's in the bins and what's in the laundry. And you know, it's so intimate. It's so
Mhm.
intimate having somebody in your house. And especially somebody who's entrusted with caring your children and loving your children. You
Mhm.
know, loving relationship, they do become like part of the family, and yet they're not. And that
Yeah.
tension I found absolutely fascinating. So yeah, she's a very kind of interesting character, and she gives us a particular insight into the family that she works for.
Yeah, and what she's also got that, and then they want her, the woman wants her to go back to that end of the house. Like, don't come out
Yeah,
of your, she basically says, don't come out of your part of the house at night. Like,
yeah,
you stay over there. That's where you belong. We live over here. And even at that point, it's like whose roles are which. And assigning a role as an employer, it becomes a different thing from just being a friend. So they're like, you know, wandering around it like, well, wait, what do I do? I don't leave this part of the house. Why? You know?
yeah. Very hard to set those boundaries, and I think some women want it both ways with, you know,
Mhm.
those, and you see those relationships go very wrong, because you're asking an awful lot of somebody, and then you're asking them to kind of disappear when they're no longer convenient to you. And I think the whole that whole dynamic between women and their nannies I find totally fascinating. So yeah, and so it was really important to me to kind of flesh her out fully as a character. You know, she's not a kind of prop in the life of somebody else. She was a really important character who had her own story and her own, yeah, her own presence in the book.
And I do love that she is no longer important to her. You know what I mean? I just love that she's no longer, you know, like important for her to have around. We don't need you around
Yeah.
anymore. You know, it's like, um, you have, what have your mom friends said about your work? I'm sure that a lot of them are saying, oh, gee, I don't really want to be in this book, please. You know what I mean? I don't really want to be in this. Please don't put me in this book.
Yeah, it's really funny. When I told them the title, they were like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, the other mothers. Like, what? So us?
They're not you. They're others, not you. They're the other mothers, not my friend.
Other mothers. Yeah, exactly. No, they find it really hilarious, and they constantly try and send me bits of the book, and they're like, "Oh, this was Amy, wasn't it? Or this was Sophie, or this was like," I'm like, "No," because obviously, like, they're not actually real people. But
They're not
but
actually real people,
but
folks,
at the
but you know.
same but at the same time, um it is really I think they find it really fun, because the other mothers is set exactly where we live as well. I mean, I wrote it a lot I wrote most of it in lockdowns, couldn't go far.
Go around the
So
block, come back.
yeah, literally, I was like, "Oh, well, I guess I'll write about this park where I am allowed to go." Um, and so, yeah, and so that's fun for them. But yeah, I think of Greenwich Park was funny, because Greenwich Park is set in an antenatal group where there's this very weird dynamic emerges between two women in the antenatal group. And my antenatal group found that so funny, and they all messaged me to be like, did you base this book on this particular person in the group? Who it was kind of strange. I think I think I can safely talk about it because she's like moved away. But she was kind of an oddball, and yeah, and so there was quite a lot of suspicion that that's where I got the I mean, but of course I did get the idea from that experience, you know, and right up there's some of the details right up to like the jammed up windows that we couldn't open. It was really hot in there and in the classes, and and just the intensity of that, and being forced to basically be friends with this group of random people who happen to be having a baby at the same time as you, was really intense and really strange, and definitely did inspire my kind of real life experiences. But yeah, I think mostly they just find it very entertaining, to be honest. There may be some people who no longer talk to me anymore, but I haven't noticed them
Maybe so, maybe so.
disappear from my life.
There's like, okay, you're gone. That's fine. Well, it was funny because remember when we talked the last time, I said that the thing that I was the most concerned at when people were going around the room in prenatal classes, like labor, delivery, I'm like the other mothers. So when I saw the title of this book, I'm like, she must have been listening last time when I said that, the
Yeah.
other mothers. That's where she got the title from. So I'll take credit. No, I'm only playing. But it was very, very funny because I said, yep, it's exactly the way you feel, because it is you and the other mothers. And sometimes it's the other mothers that you're close to, and sometimes it's the other mothers. It goes both ways. Definitely
Yeah.
goes both ways. The book opens, it's April 2019, and Tasha's in a police station, and we wonder what's going on, like what's happening. And it's what I call the cold open of the book. Sometimes it's called the prologue. I call it the cold open when it's one of these. Did you write that later, or was that something you did like up front? Because you've got her there, and then we go back to September 2018.
Yeah. No, I knew it would end up there.
Okay.
And I had had the idea for that finale in Cornwall when I was in Cornwall, when I wrote it quite early, that part. So, but I didn't quite know what had happened. I mean, I kind of wrote it without knowing exactly what would have happened to lead up to that point, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm a very scattergun sort of writer, really. I don't have a very, whenever I describe my process to people, it never sounds sensible. But I knew that it's just I know certain things about the story, and then the rest of it, I think for me, I have to leave a bit of creative space to fill in the gaps, and I just kind of trust that we'll get there. But I knew that something terrible was going to happen on this. I love the idea of them all going away to one of their holiday homes in
Yeah.
Cornwall. I mean, having a holiday home in Cornwall is like the ultimate social faux pas that all the rich people do in London anyway, because it's this place that's been like overrun by holiday homes, and it's really controversial, and all the local people in Cornwall hate it, understandably, because all the rich Londoners just buy up all these beautiful properties. So it's the exact kind of thing that these kind of women would do. And but Tash is obviously kind of loving the idea of going there and tagging along. And I wanted the story to kind of climax there. But yeah, I worked out quite a lot of the detail later about like how what would lead up to that confrontation and that disaster, and then what would happen afterwards, because obviously there's more twists to come.
There are more twists. There are more twists, and we go to different points of view. We move from one timeline to the next, and sometimes the shop chapters are really short. Even though it's Tosh, it's 2 pages, then it's 3 pages, and I feel like one of the things that you're actually all writers have to write towards right now is there's so much streaming content out there that moves so quickly, so you can't labor a story down anymore, because that's not the way people are used to experiencing storytelling at all, whether it's visual or written storytelling. Am I onto something there?
Yeah, for sure. I think you have to work hard to keep your reader interested, and I think that was part of the discipline that I learned as a journalist, was really the hook and getting people, and you have to be quite tough on yourself sometimes. But it's also what I like as a reader. It's also
Mhm.
kind of taste, and I like thrillers like that, and towards the end of the book, if the pace isn't kind of picking up quick enough, then I think something's wrong. It should feel like that.
Yeah.
You've put in all the work at the beginning, and the payoff is when the pace really starts to ramp up. So I think it's partly because thriller readers are very sophisticated, and they get through a lot of thrillers, and the
Mhm.
competition out there. I mean, there's so many people writing good thrillers, right? So the bar is high, and you have to I think, and it's just not being self-indulgent as well, just get rid of anything that doesn't serve the story. I think being a journalist helps with that. I'm quite brutal on myself with my editing. It just kind of
Right.
chuck out great big
You're
chunks
gone.
of thing that
You're out of
aren't
here. You're
necessary.
out of here.
Yeah,
You're
you're
gone.
out, you're gone. We don't need you. But yeah, I think short chapters are a good thing.
And some thrillers right now, I feel, are all sounding the same. Like they're all, it's vanilla. And to find something that's got chocolate and strawberry and a cherry on top is different because there's a lot that's very, very rote. And I was seeing that a lot last year. There was a lot that was this. So when I read this, it was like different storyline, the way it was being written. And I remember you were saying when we talked last time, you're not a plotter, but you prefer discovering the story as you write. And then you
Mm,
go back later and see how to improve it. And I think you've called it refining. And I think that's a very elegant way to call it. What's editing, but it's refining. I'm refining my work. But I think that for writing it cold and then doing that, you're right. It's a lot of what you did as a journalist, is you had to hone it back. You had
yeah.
1,500 words. You didn't have a word more.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's right. And I think with but partly it's because of the way that I enjoyed writing. And for me, it is a process of creative discovery, actually, the sitting down and writing. Sometimes I start a scene and I have ideas as I'm writing it about where it could go. And they kind of come to me. And sometimes my characters do things that I wasn't expecting them to do. And for me, that's what makes it exciting. And if I had a spreadsheet where I had scene by scene, this is going to happen and this is going to happen, I had it all plotted at the beginning and I just stuck to that and wrote it out. For me, that would feel really boring,
Right.
um, and unrewarding, and I don't think I would stick with it. And so for me, the whole fun of the book is partly discovery. So I'll kind of lean into the bits that I'll have a sense of the story and I'll know some of the landmarks along the way, and I'll have a kind of idea about roughly how it could end. But often a lot changes in the writing, and that's to me what's fun. But then in order to get that feeling that it's really tightly plotted and correctly paced, you do then have to go back and think, okay, so how, now that I know how it ends, how can I really boil it down to that story and make sure that it's working enough for the reader and
Yeah.
that those twists are coming at the right moments. But that's fun as well. That's the part that's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. It's all the parts of it are fun except for the copy edits that come at the end, but
Yeah.
they have to be done as well.
You see the words over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
And it's like,
It's like I'm
and,
done with this now.
and you're sort of like, wait, did I really write that? When did I
I
write that? How
know.
did I write that line? Can I change that line? No, 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 no. You know?
Yeah, totally.
So you talk about it, you've heard you talk about you always love to write. Do you like to rewrite and edit? Like I know there's a part of it that's brutal, but do you really like that honing and refining and tossing, or is it just pure drudge?
I find cutting hard sometimes, but in general, I do like editing because I feel like once you have a whole draft, the first edit I do really enjoy because you've got something to play with. It's like you have your lump of clay, you've done all that, but and now you can make it into something really, really good. And it's never, the first draft is never good. And
Mhm.
that's what I'm trying to remind myself at the moment because I'm coming towards the end of a first draft. It's never good. So it's fine. It's fine that it's not good because the second draft is where you make it into something that really shines. And that is rewarding because you can see it getting better all the time as you're editing. Um, so yeah, I like all of that part of the process for sure. And I think and I also like and also you get to a point where you need outside input. And with
Mhm.
the other mothers, had a wonderful editor who just helped me really see what was going wrong with it because I was doing something really structurally ambitious. And she said, you've just chosen something really hard to do here. And
Yeah.
so that's why it's hard to pull it off and make it work perfectly. Um, but it was about the chapters talking to each other, even when they weren't the same timeline. And
Hmm.
that was the thing that clicked once I'd done that kind of, it's probably about the fourth draft, to be honest, but it did click eventually. Um, and then that's hugely satisfying. And you think, oh no, there is a really good book here.
I'm now brilliant. I'm now brilliant. I've turned my brilliance has just turned around, da 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 da, So
I know, but it's so funny because so many times in the process you think this isn't gonna work. People are gonna say it's not as good as Greenwich Park. That was my huge fear, is that people would say, oh, she did Greenwich Park, that was good, but this one wasn't so good. But it just
no,
has, people
no,
really like it.
yeah.
And some people say, oh, I love them both, but I preferred Greenwich Park. But most people actually prefer this one.
Mhm.
Um, and and if people, and if some people prefer Greenwich Park, that's fine, but they're not disappointed,
Yeah.
they're like, people have different favorites, but it's been, the reaction's been absolutely amazing.
Yeah. It's really, they're good companions to each other as well. I think
Yeah.
you can see how you moved ahead in your craft, and you could definitely see it because that's the reason I asked to read the book, because it was like, wait, I really want to get a look at this and I want to see what she did, how she moved in a different direction. And you really did. And it's also, it's like, okay, these are the mothers before, this is the mothers later. Like
Yeah.
this is the women, this is what happens to them after the birthing class. This is where they go from here.
Yeah, they end up.
And I know the cover is different in the UK, but like, did you have a hand in what this cover was? Because it's really her on the outside. I see looking in, but looking in at
No,
what?
but I loved it straight away, and I think it's exactly right for the novel. Um, yeah, because I think people on covers are really hard,
Yes,
and sometimes it doesn't work. But
right.
the way that it's been done here with the looking at the back of her looking in, and then these kind of shadowy figures, I absolutely love it.
Yeah,
So
because
thrilled.
it's like, is it the mother and the nanny? Is it the husband and the wife? Like, who is it? Who's she in there? And who's she
Yeah,
talking
I
to?
know. Everyone asks me, like, who are they? So which one's which? I'm like, well, I guess it's Sophie and Claire, but
Yeah.
it's who you want them to be.
Yeah, it could be the other mothers talking about each other. You don't
Yeah,
know. You
exactly.
don't know
Could be
what's going on. What's the
yeah.
line at the top? Next level mum noir. I like that. Smart, tense, and gripping. I loved it from Ella Lee Lloyd. And I just love that. Like next level mum noir. So there you
One
are.
more.
You have your own category, mum noir. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
One more. It's huge. I think
It's a
it's
huge
really interesting.
category. I'm building it myself.
Yeah.
So, is the cover you had a hand? Did you have any hand on it, or did they just show that to you and you said brilliant?
No, I hardly had any involvement. They're so good, and I just loved it. I didn't really want to do anything to it. We wondered about having scratchiness on it, like they had with Greenwich Park. It's that slight
Mhm.
scratchiness on the cover, but
Right.
I think it kind of made it look like there was a disco going on in there or something. Like it just didn't work with the windows. So anyway, yeah, I did. I honestly hardly any involvement. No, I really liked it as soon as I saw it.
I just do these things. I just do it from there. Okay, so did you have any hand in the audio? And is the audio the British or is it like in America? Do we have the British edition of the audio
I
or
think
do we
we
have
have the
our own?
same, yeah, the British.
Same. Yeah.
Even though in the American edition, they'll obviously, oh, actually, no, is that right? Because there'll be different words.
Yeah,
To
it's
change a
yes.
lot
Did
of
you have to
words.
change words in the American
Yeah,
edition?
loads of words, because my book is very, very British in its raw form, and it's incomprehensible apparently to North American readers. So I have to change all my bins to trash cans and all my biscuits to cookies and all my pavements to sidewalks. But I don't mind that, whatever works. Um, it really doesn't bother me at all. Sometimes I get fussy about dialogue because obviously they are British characters,
Right.
but really it's not. It's never been a process. I actually find it completely fascinating which words translate and don't. What was the one we struggled with? Roundabouts. Do you not have
Roundabouts.
roundabouts?
We have circles. They're called circles. They're not called roundabout. Like you go
A
like this, and
circle is a very broad category.
some people get off at different places. So you go.
Right. But
I
you know
think.
what I'm talking about.
Well, if you live in New
Clearly.
Jersey, you know what they are because we have a lot of circles. But
Okay.
if people move here from someplace else, they don't know what they're doing. And my mom learned to drive late in life. This is a very funny story. And there was one circle that we had to go around. And she says, okay, everyone be quiet. I'm going to drive around the circle. And there'd be cars coming in for a while. She goes, oh, just hope no one else comes in. And there would be in her little turquoise Corvair, like moving around in a circle. And then she go like and then we're on the main road. And then she's not the least bit nervous. The roundabout, which was had her completely terrified. So it was
Yeah,
very
I
funny.
hope, yeah, it was. I find it really funny the back and forth with the US copy editors. Like, what is this? Like, we don't have these.
We don't have anything like this. So what
Yeah.
are you working on now? Have the mothers gone to like the second grade or something like
Oh
that?
yeah, we're basically, yeah, like
The mothers are now in school and they're getting
yeah,
graded.
yeah. Um, so yeah, it's a new novel. I can't say much about it, I'm afraid, but it's the same sort of thing. But yeah, I do feel like I'm almost moving up the school years, which is quite funny. And of course, relationships with other mothers are part of it, and they change, and they're not quite so much the focus in my new novel.
Right.
But the mums are always important characters. You've always got to keep your eye on them, uh,
Yes.
and what they're up to in the background, for sure. But no, I think I was quite interested in when I started writing this novel in the idea of um, how there were a lot of people moving out of the city,
Yes.
and suddenly there was this anxiety about living in a city, and whether it was like I feel like we there was an interesting crux point for the mothers that I knew and the parents that I knew around when your child starts school, and there was suddenly this like, oh, we is should we live here, or do we need to move to the suburbs, or like, I was quite interested in that, so that's kind of part of it, and just yeah, I think just the kind of experience. So it starts with a kind of act of violence,
Oh,
and how and so it's kind of a backwards book, and then it's all about how that plays out and what was behind that and what the kind of implications are for this family. So yeah, I'll
very
say
interesting.
that much.
Say that much. Is it a 2025 book? Everything's supposed to be
I think that's the hope. Yeah.
yeah, hope and dream. Hope and dream. Yeah. Well, it was really funny during COVID, everybody fled the city because they
Yeah.
realized that being in the apartment, even if you loved your wife and you're in a one-bedroom apartment, it wasn't really good. And if you had
Yeah.
the child stuffed in a closet, all of a sudden they were getting bigger and they couldn't be in that closet anymore. And was a time to move out of the and a lot of people bought homes without thinking about whether those homes were really in good shape. They just bought a home. And then they said, and we're not even going to do a home inspection. We're just going to buy it. And my friends are going, what did I buy? Like all of a sudden now we live at Home Depot, like we live buying supplies to fix the house. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happens,
Yeah. That
Yeah.
kind of lockdown regret of people who moved. Yeah, that was all really interesting to me. I actually started writing a different novel that was kind of entirely about that, and then I realized that about 25 different thriller writers were doing the same thing. And I thought, nope, I
I've
think
read
I'm going
that.
to need to
I
do
just read
something.
that last week. I can't do
Yeah,
that.
exactly. I read a brilliant one called, I think it's called The People Before by Charlotte Northedge, which is now being made into a TV series. And I just thought, well, she's done that.
Yeah, there we go. I
That's
won't even
been
get
done.
the, unless I'm adapting it, I'm out of luck. I'm out of
Yeah.
luck. Now, do you have any film options on either one of your books? Because if not,
Uh,
they should be out there.
yeah, no, they are both. I think so. Greenwich Park, yes, but with the writer's strike has slowed everything down, so I'm not
Yes.
exactly sure what's happening.
Right.
Fingers crossed. And then there's kind of lots of discussions going on about the other mothers. So
Bet there are. And I bet
it's
there are a lot of people want to play the other mothers, let me be one of the other mothers, let's go
yeah.
there. Yeah, it's interesting because the strike, I think we all learned the word force majeure, like what it really
Yeah.
means. Like you have that in a contract, you go, oh yeah, force majeure. What's the big deal? And then you go, force majeure. Oh, that's what it means. I have 1 week left and it's not until the strike is over. Oh, that's what it's talking about. Yeah. Heard
Mm.
a lot of that from authors. And then they're all talking about how I was reading the film business, I think is going to be off 1 billion in 2024. I was reading that the other day because there's so much not coming out. And a lot of the taste also changed during the time where a lot of the superhero movies are not performing the way they thought they would perform.
Yeah.
So a lot of the quieter films are what are performing and nobody is set for that. So there's been more changes than just in the authors and in writing business. There's been a lot of changes along the way.
Yeah, I think I heard that from my TV agent that basically there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty about what's going to work in the new
Mhm.
environment. And
Yeah.
people,
What's going to work, what people are looking for, whether they want to delve into a deep story, how far they'll go on watching something. I mean, recently I watched a story called Fellow Strangers. I think it's Fellow Strangers. I think that was what it was called on the Showtime. And it was about two people who were gay through the 50s and through the 80s, fellow travelers. And it was so well done. It's probably like one of those pitch perfect shows. Yes, there was a lot of nudity and yada, yada, yada. But by the same token, it was like a brilliant storytelling kind of a thing. And I haven't seen a lot of brilliant storytelling like in a nutshell like that. And I thought that was really like out there as something that was really good this year. And then there are other things that are quiet, but we're also getting much more critical, I find. Like we went to see Ferrari in the theaters because my husband and my kids, my two sons are car people. And we watched this and we came out and they go, okay, good beginning. Aaron Driver was great. A lull here. And you realize the lull can't be there anymore because we're used to seeing this. And
100%. I know so many people, parents who've rewatched the movies they loved as kids with their kind of teenage children, and they're like, "This is so slow," you know.
Mhm.
And they just think, "Well, no, but it's going to build. Give it a chance." But yeah, we just expect everything to happen like that now, and I think people are tiring of a long series. You know, they don't
Mhm.
like. they're worried about their screen time, and they look and they see, oh, great, there's 10 series of this and 1,000 episodes. That's just going to suck me in and drain my life. Whereas I'm much more attracted to think I really enjoyed Poker Face. I don't know if you watched
I
that,
haven't
but
done
just
it yet. Yeah.
like
Okay.
it's very good. Like little, each episode is standalone. There, it is a series, but each episode is a standalone murder mystery, with this brilliant sort of offbeat female detective. Brilliant. And then you can just watch one and you're done. And you don't have to, you
Yeah.
don't feel like with what happened for me when I had my first child with Game of Thrones, where it was like, okay, so I will see you all in 6 months because I'm now addicted to this, even though I know it's terrible for my brain and I can't do anything else until I've completed it. So yeah.
Yeah, my husband will come in and go, I don't do episodes. This is the way he wants to know. I don't do episodes. I said, well, there's 4. Can you choke through 4 maybe? Because
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. And then I will also just sit down and watch all 8. Like I'll stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning and just do the whole thing. And he'll sit there and go, I've watched 1. Now I'm going to go in the hot tub. And I'm like, 1? Like 1? That's all we
I
got. There
know
was
it's
1.
so annoying when you watch something together and then they don't want to watch, and you're like, what? No, I want to
What?
watch another episode.
Like, can I finish watching The Crown without you? And he goes, yes. I said, you don't care anymore. He goes, no. And I was like, all right, I'll finish
Oh,
it
my
myself.
husband made the same decision this series. He was like, I'm not feeling it. You can watch it on your own.
I like this. You can watch on your own. And he's like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna go watch hockey. You're on your own. So I don't know. I think the other mothers will be like absolutely great as a show though, because
Oh, I
there's such
love
a
it so
good
much.
build of it. There's such a good build and there's the backstory and you can go deep into you've got, we don't talk about all of the characters and this one woman character they can go into the backstory of and just make it so interesting because there's not just one death, but everybody, there's 2. And that's really what sparks the real interest in like how are they related or are they?
Yeah, more than 2 actually.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a higher body count this time. It's
Okay.
growing
All
and
right. You're
growing
right.
with every
You're right.
book.
Okay. So this is next time when I read one of Catherine's books, I'm going to go tick 1, tick 2 body, tick 3. Let's see how many we get to.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we got a chance to talk again because it was, it was such a pleasure to pick this up. And it was like the end of the year. And I was like, get that book to me now. I need to read it. So I want to make sure it was one of our 2023 bets ons because, it's got to be within the year. We've got to keep everything together. And you were out about 6 months earlier in the UK. So
That's
coming back
right.
to
Yeah.
talk about it now.
Yeah.
Okay. Book 3. I'm waiting on it. I'm waiting on it. Thank you so much.
You'll be the first to read it. Thank you
Thank
so,
you.
so much for having me.
Thanks. I look forward to seeing you next time. And to our
You too.
viewers, look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks To as well. If you want to find us, it's the Book Report Network on YouTube or Book Reporter Talks To wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks, everyone.